Today we're redesigning Bill.com, a piece of software that I use often as a freelancer to invoice my clients for work that I've done for them. Now the interface is a little bit weird. I'm not necessarily sure how it's supposed to work, but you can see that from at least the home screen, there's just a lot of unused white space, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in this case it is because it provides very little value. I have to scroll quite a ways to actually get to something useful down here, and then there's just really weird inconsistent fonts used throughout the entire app, weird spacing inconsistencies, so we're just going to polish it all up. Here's the style guide. As always, we're using their lovely orange accent color, and then we are upgrading them to Poppins, which is one of the popular Google fonts that has a very nice modern but fun feel to it. So let's get stuck in there and see what we come up with. Starting out here, I really wanted to preserve the little welcome back text that they had on the existing UI because I feel like it gives a nice little personable bit of flair, but we ultimately remove this and replace it with something a little more functional. We are going to keep the floating new button because I feel like it's a pretty well-established pattern and it looks good. But we're going to add a label to it and give it a little more horizontal width so that it's easier for people to actually tap on it. And now that we've moved the navigation to the bottom of the screen, like it is for basically every other mobile app these days, we're now creating the little notification component where we can showcase various new features of the app or perhaps special offers to the user in a way that doesn't detract from their overall experience. Now, my initial intuition here was to kind of copy the way that they do it today with the buttons stacked on top of each other, but eventually I kind of deviate from this and realize that you really don't need these buttons at all. You can just assume that if the user is interested on a deal, they'll click on the full container and then have a close button separate to it. So we go back to this in the future. And now I'm trying to imagine what might be relevant to a user of Bill.com on the homepage. And I'm thinking maybe open invoices makes sense, some sort of weekly transaction summary so you know what your burn rate is, but then also a visualization of your recent spending might also be interesting. So here I'm just putting together various cards that help to express those ideas to the user in a nice clean way. As you can probably tell, I was very frustrated with the navigation in this redesign, and I change it like 6 or 7 times as I'm manipulating the other components. But here, I'm just creating the ability for users to toggle between a bar chart and a line chart view for a spending graph that I'm putting together for them. And then hopefully in the next couple of minutes, we'll nail down that nav header. Quick little tip here, if you ever want to add some more depth to your bar charts, add a dark hue of your accent color at the top of the bar and a lighter hue at the bottom, and then fill with a linear gradient. This kind of makes the graph appear like it's growing upwards, and it looks really cool. I spent quite a lot of time manipulating the information hierarchy here because this is a very text-heavy, number-heavy interface, and it's really important that the numbers pull your attention in the right order. If a label pulls more attention than the value, you're usually going to get lots of confused users, and since there's lots of different values, the ones that are more important should pull your attention first. So it took me a really long time to really nail this down, but I think the result was quite solid. As you can see here, I've finally arrived at the conclusion of my navigation journey. I think this is a nice, simple header navigation that showcases the brand but doesn't pull too much visual attention. We don't necessarily want to distract the user from the main content that they're browsing on the homepage, but if we do want to advertise to them, it makes sense to do it like this, where we kind of push things off screen and let the user dismiss as needed. Now that we're creating a list of invoices, I'm going to need a single invoice item. And oftentimes when I'm creating a component like this, I'll just list out a bulleted list, usually ranked by importance, of all the things that you would want to see in that card view. That way I know what the information hierarchy should be, and that often just tells me how things should be designed. So in this case, obviously the amount of the invoice is paramount, and then the company and the status is largely secondary. So that tells me that the main piece of content that should be the first thing the user sees is the amount, and then the color applied to the status pulls it into that secondary space. Allowing the user to search through their invoices makes a lot of sense here, but what also makes sense is kind of just showing an overview at the top of the list. I don't necessarily want to look at any individual invoice in this perspective, but perhaps I just want to see overall what is pending in the next couple of weeks. And then the last thing we have to do here is give the user a way to create a new invoice. And normally when you're doing something where you're performing a creation on mobile, you usually just want to purge both the header and the footer navigation and replace it with a full screen experience that the user can get out of by pressing a back button or a cancel button. So that's what we're doing here. We're giving them a full screen overlay to create a new invoice where they can select a customer, specify the type of services they administered, and then select payment terms before creating it. This is a pretty common established pattern, and it works quite well, especially on iOS. Took me quite a long time to get the line items that you're seeing here right, and part of the problem was that I was listing out a complicated data structure within a form which itself is already a complicated UI, so I had to provide some sort of meaningful distinction, which ultimately resulted in me just putting the line items inside of their own little box, which kind of implied to the user that these are contained within the parent component. And there we go. What a lovely little UI. I'm still torn on whether or not we should have the notifications up here or maybe farther down somewhere. But either way, I think this is a very significant improvement over the existing UI. And particularly, I think the information hierarchy has been kind of solved a little bit better. So here, when I'm looking at the screen, I immediately know that I'm looking at an overview and I can kind of see what's coming in the next couple of days. I can look at anything that's open, sees a brief graph of just recent activity. If I want to browse my invoices, I first see a summary, then I can search through all of my historical invoices. And then of course, if I want to create a new invoice, I can do so, and I enter the line items accordingly. So overall, quite happy with this one, but let me know what you think in the comments. This was an interesting one for me, quite a challenging one, but hope you found something useful in this one, folks, and I'll see you next week. Bye.